Oh no! Your brother!
Judge Brewer!
Jacob.
Chris Wheeler, you are under arrest for the murder of Judge Jacob Brewer.
Lord, what have you...
In Las Vegas, Chris knocked hard on her man's door, but got no response. Feeling uneasy, she headed into the brew house and was shocked to find him dead. Around the same time, a cop noticed a car speeding and gave chase. Turns out, the driver was none other than Judge Kim. After a quick warning about speeding, the officer let her go. Kim was actually on her way to take over as the new judge, succeeding the late one. When she arrived, she introduced herself to her team and said a prayer in the courtroom before officially starting her new role. On her first day, her aide, Vicky, brought her some coffee, but Kim, in her nervousness, spilled most of it on the floor and nearly slipped herself. Things didn't get any better when her first case rolled around. She had a hard time getting her facts straight, which upset one of the defendants. The guy flew into a rage and lunged at her, forcing Kim to defend herself by hitting him with her gavel. Vicky had to jump in to calm things down. Later, Kim learned she had a surprise hearing the next day, which her assistant had accidentally missed putting in her schedule. That evening, Kim decided to grill some food by her car and noticed people whispering about her. The courtroom incident had earned her the nickname Miss Hammer, something Vicky found hilarious, but Kim wasn't thrilled about. On their drive later, Vicky teased Kim about being homeless, to which Kim casually admitted she was but joked that she still managed to bathe regularly. When they arrived at their destination, Vicky insisted Kim stay over, and after some hesitation, Kim agreed. While chatting with the bartender that night, Kim discovered he was Bart, the father of a boy involved in one of her cases. She introduced herself as the judge, and they struck up a conversation until Vicky interrupted. That night, while waiting outside a 7-Eleven, Vicky got a call about autopsy results. She turned around and realized Kim wasn't following her. Panicking, she ran outside to find Kim in the trunk of her car, explaining she couldn't sleep in her cramped space. The next day, the courtroom was packed for the case opening. Kim decided to postpone the hearing until Monday. Later, they went over the day's events, including public backlash from a woman upset her custody case had been delayed. Vicky provided some useful intel to help Kim navigate the situation. Later, Kim met Judge Carpenter, who mocked the hammer incident at first. But the conversation took a turn when he began questioning her competence as a judge, making sexist remarks about whether a woman from the city could even handle the job. His words stung, but they also fueled Kim's determination to prove him wrong. On her next day in court, Kim handled a drug case and celebrated a woman who had beaten her addiction. The courtroom burst into applause when Kim declared her free. But the mood shifted when another woman, Miss Angle, was called up for release, and Kim realized she hadn't truly changed. Angle got angry, confronted Kim, and threw shade, referencing her Miss Hammer reputation with a snarky, "Watch out, lady, you've got a hammer." Later, Kim found a strange letter and a voicemail in her car, prompting her to head home. When she got there, her dad answered the door holding a gun, scaring the life out of her. Once she calmed him down, she went inside and found her sister, Chris. Concerned, Kim asked where she'd been, only to learn Chris had been living in the trunk of her car. Over dinner, Kim shared updates about the case she was working on, which was now a murder investigation. The conversation shifted to their father's declining health due to dementia. Kim pointed out that his years of alcoholism were taking their toll, but Chris snapped back, making a reference to their rough childhood. Suddenly, while washing dishes, Kim got a chilling call informing her that Chris was the prime suspect in the murder case. Kim panicked, realizing the killer might be close. She saw a car speeding away from their home, woke Chris up, and told her to grab their mom's gun. Chris hesitated, and Kim's attention was drawn to a childhood scratch mark on the wall under the stairs, stirring painful memories of their father's violent outbursts. Eventually, Chris handed over the gun, and Kim felt a mix of fear and determination as she processed the seriousness of their situation. The next day, Bart showed up at Kim's office with coffee. During their chat, she realized he had a bad temper and that the security cameras tied to the murder investigation were down. Their conversation was interrupted by her assistant, Joe, who walked in and exchanged a suspicious look with Bart on his way out. When Joe asked why Bart was there, Kim brushed it off with a terse, "Just coffee." Later, Kim visited Angela in prison and asked about her lawyer, Leonardo. Angela opened up about the horrific abuse he had inflicted on her and the awful things he'd done to other prisoners. Back at the office, Kim shared how moved she was by Angela's story. That's when Deputy Wayne showed up to apologize for a past mishap and dropped a bombshell. Chris had been charged with the murder of Judge Jacob Brewer. Chris freaked out as Wayne escorted her away, but not before Kim confirmed the arrest warrant was legit. Back at her office, Kim wasted no time confronting Ellis about why he thought her sister, Chris, was guilty. Turns out what looked like Judge Brewer's death from a heart attack was actually linked to drugs and misconduct. Since Chris was the last person seen with him, she became the main suspect. Kim, who had dealt with tough cases like this before, decided to dig deeper. She started by investigating Leo's background to verify Angela's claims about his abuse. They needed Eileen's testimony to nail him, but she was hesitant to step forward. Kim and Vicky got to work convincing Eileen to speak up. Meanwhile, Kim confronted Chris about drugs found in her room. Chris, having some knowledge of the local brothel scene, claimed the medication was their dad's and that it had ended up there by mistake. Kim wondered if Judge Brewer's wife had any idea about her husband's shady trips to the Shady Lady brothel. Later, when Kim got home, she found her dad attempting to cook in the kitchen, nearly setting the house on fire. She cleaned up the mess, but he kept calling out for Chris and asking for beer. His words hit her hard, even though she tried not to show it. The next day, after a caregiver arrived to look after her dad, Kim headed to court. She argued against releasing 2 men involved in a drug case, and surprisingly, Leo agreed with her stance. As she prepared to move on to the next case, Leo suddenly walked into the courtroom, leaving her with more unanswered questions. Then, to everyone's surprise, Eileen showed up, ready to share her story. Kim asked Eileen how she knew Leo and learned that he had coerced her into staying quiet with false promises of clearing her name. Eileen had reluctantly gone along with it to avoid further trouble. Outraged, Kim ordered Leo to be arrested for his misconduct and made sure Angela's case was revisited as well. Back at the office, Kim offered Eileen a position as her assistant, which left Eileen surprised but grateful. After a moment's hesitation, she accepted the job. Meanwhile, Joe brought in a mysterious package with no return address. When Kim opened it, she was horrified to find her cat inside, dead, in a threatening letter. Shaken, she immediately tried calling the nurse who was caring for her dad but got no answer. Panicked, she grabbed her gun and rushed home, only to find her dad and the nurse safe. While looking for her missing cat, Kim carefully hid the gun. Later, she wrote a letter to Judge Brewer's wife and arranged to meet her. During their meeting, Kim tried to explain Chris's innocence, but Brewer's wife wasn't having it. She accused Chris of having an affair with her husband and ruining their marriage. She even presented a letter Brewer had written a year earlier, where he'd threatened to kill her if she ever left him. After reading the letter, Kim let the wife go. Back at the office, Kim confronted Joe about the threatening letter. At first, Joe denied any involvement, but Kim pointed out that the handwriting matched. Faced with the evidence, Joe admitted to writing it 2 years earlier. When Kim asked about possible drug connections, Joe said there weren't any, but suggested that Judge Brewer might have had enemies. Kim later shared the letter with Chris, which left her uneasy. The lab results eventually revealed that the drug used on Brewer had been injected, confirming foul play. Frustrated with Ellis's refusal to drop his accusations against Chris, Kim returned to the office to focus on her next steps. The next day, Eileen started her new role as Kim's assistant. In court, Kim handled a case involving a boy with anger management issues. She decided he needed to attend anger management classes, which didn't sit well with his parents, Bart and his wife. That night at a bar, Bart's wife confronted Kim, furious about her son's struggles with mental health. Her anger boiled over, and she nearly attacked Kim, but the bartender stepped in just in time. Later, while Bart was distracted, Kim snooped through his belongings and found a pair of shoes that matched footprints near her car. Suspicious, she cold-called the bartender the next day to ask for security footage. Around the same time, Eileen informed Vicky that Kim might be in trouble. Vicky, meanwhile, had been talking to Bart, who casually admitted to drugging Kim's drink, just like he'd done before. Bart revealed even more shocking details, like how Kim's cat had died, and he hinted that he'd been keeping tabs on her. At one point, he held her at gunpoint, forcing Kim to keep her cool and try to talk him into confessing. Eventually, Bart admitted he had killed Judge Brewer because of his feelings for Charlene, but claimed he didn't want her anymore. Kim offered him a chance to cooperate and get a lighter sentence, but he refused and threatened to kill her instead. Kim made a bold move, hitting the gas pedal and crashing through a fence, which knocked Bart unconscious. She tried to escape, but he came to and chased her down, pinning her to the ground with his gun aimed at her. Just in time, Vicky and the police arrived. Kim managed to shoot Bart in self-defense, ending the ordeal. Afterward, Kim discovered that Bart had placed a GPS tracker on her car. When she confronted him about why he'd been hovering around her vehicle, he claimed it was because he feared she'd end up murdered like Brewer. In the aftermath, Charlene was arrested, and Chris was finally cleared and allowed to go home to their dad. Later, Joe, who had tried her hand at karaoke at the bar but couldn't carry a tune, laughed it off with the team. Kim later met with Judge Carpenter, who tried to mock her for being messy, but she turned the tables, proving her strength and determination. That evening, Vicky encouraged Kim to join a group karaoke session, and soon everyone joined in, singing and laughing together. As they enjoyed the moment, Bart, now behind bars, watched silently from afar.